First Amendment to the United States Constitution prohibits the making of any law respecting an establishment of religion, impeding the free exercise of religion, abridging the freedom of speech, infringing on the freedom of the press, interfering with the right to peaceably assemble, or prohibiting the petitioning for a government redress of grievances. My guest is well known for her stand on the First Amendment, especially where religion is the basis for it to begin with, and why it is supposed to be this way. And we will find out by introducing Barbara Samuels. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Alrighty there. And you're from Catholics for Freedom of Religion, and
Yes.
we're going to pretty much talk about the issues of religion and our First Amendment right and all those other things. So let me, who are you first, all right, so the audience knows who you are.
Yes. Well, my name is Barbara Samuels, and I am a longtime resident of New York, although to my friends and family in Ohio, where I come from, I consider myself a visitor in New York and always a native Buckeye. I grew up in the farmlands of Ohio, in Northwest Ohio, and I have about 60 first cousins who have stayed in that area, so I go back often. So that's where my roots are, in the Midwest. And when I first married my husband, who was a native New Yorker from Queens with a terrific accent, and I would go with him to family gatherings, and his relatives would say to me, "You talk funny." I would say, No.
You talk funny.
I speak standard American English dialect. You talk funny.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that was my background, a firm background of family and faith and good American values, living among farmers of German heritage who knew how to work hard, and they did work hard. And they were faithful to our country, and they were faithful to their church, whatever that faith might be. And so when I came to New York and I raised my family, and I found that, the degree that I got from Ohio State in English, in education, really didn't help me when I wanted to go back to work, because on Long Island there was a surplus of teachers at that point. So I thought, let me go take an accounting course. I've never taken an accounting course. 4 years later, I ended up with a master's degree in accounting from C.W. Post, and I thought, well, I'll take the CPA exam, which was another 2 years of study. And after that, I ended up teaching on the adjunct faculty at Suffolk Community for 25 years, teaching accounting. And I had my own at Suffolk Community, usually at the campus here in Brentwood, because I can leave my house and in 10 minutes be in front of the class. And then I also had my own accounting practice for many years.
So, established that you are. And this issue came about, what got you first started with this issue?
Well, what first got me started with this issue was when I finally grew up. After many years of being a student, then being a mom, raising children, and working hard, and all of a sudden I started to see in our country things that were happening to our liberties. And when I heard talk about changing everyone's health care, for example, and changing this, that just didn't sound right. And what really set me off on working for religious freedom was when this current administration's Secretary of Health and Human Services signed a regulation that took away the freedom of religion of every American, because it said the Health and Human Services mandate said that every employer in this country with over 50 employees must provide, as part of their health insurance, abortion-inducing drugs, contraception, and sterilization. The only employers that were exempt from that were churches themselves and the schools that are directly incorporated with the churches. So the religious universities, the religious-based charities, and any other religious-based organization, even the Little Sisters of the Poor, who became very well known for this because they fought it all the way to the Supreme Court. All of these organizations were required, even though it was obvious that this was their sincerely and deeply held religious belief, not to provide these things. They were required by this regulation to provide them. And I said, wait a minute. That is everyone's religious freedom. In 2012.
Oh, that's fairly recent.
That happened in 2012. And it was to be effective in 2014. And so right away, religious organizations of every faith started fighting this. And for me, being a Catholic and being a lay Catholic, I thought to myself, why aren't people in the churches, in the Catholic churches, in the Lutheran churches, in the evangelical churches, in the Jewish synagogues, why are they not rising up and realizing how important this is to their religious freedom? And for what, I never got an answer to that, but I decided, along with a couple of friends on Long Island, that we would start something. So we started in our churches, educating about
It's good that you did, and I'm
religious
familiar with what
freedom.
you're talking about. I try to get the church in my local community to concern themselves with, if there were to be a divorce, why wouldn't they consider to have counseling or mediation first? And they didn't want to address it. They just didn't, never addressed it. So why is the church, you may want to ask this question to your other church members, why is it backing away from involving themselves in these issues?
Well, some churches are backing away and some are not. They are all involving themselves, but in different ways. For example, the Catholic Church and the Southern Baptist Convention, the two biggest religious groups in the country, have worked together and have signed documents and open letters to Congress, to the government, to the president, to Americans about this denial of religious freedom. The media will not report it. You don't know about it. Most people don't know about it.
No, I don't.
Because
As a matter of
the
fact, I
media
didn't know the
will
date or time of this
not
either.
Report it.
Well, you're going to report it now. I mean, hopefully we're going to get this message out. I think it's important. Let's talk a little bit more about the First Amendment aspect to what you're doing. Why is the First Amendment, why do you feel like it's under attack? I guess I should start there.
Okay.
Because I agree, it is.
Our First Amendment, when people understand what the First Amendment means, they very quickly understand that it is being undermined. And this has happened slowly, and now it's out in the open. It's very deliberate. For example, the Health and Human Service Mandate, which absolutely crushes religious freedom, there was no attempt to hide it. It was a regulation signed into law, never debated, never voted on by anyone answerable to the public, but it was signed into law with the stroke of a pen. So if you look at the First Amendment, and to find out why I say the First Amendment is under attack, the First Amendment tells you not only do we have freedom of religion, remember our freedom of religion is based on our founders' belief that every man had freedom of conscience from our Creator. And they said that right at the start of the Declaration of Independence. It is self-evident that all men are endowed with certain unalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that in order to secure these rights, governments are created among men based upon the permission of the electorate. So you and I tell the government what they have power over and what they do not have power over. President Thomas Jefferson said, our government has powers over only those rights that we give to them. Our right of conscience, we did not submit to them. We cannot. We owe it to our Creator.
What's the rationale, do you think, for striking, for that happening now?
For what's happening now?
Yeah.
Well, what's happening now is the culmination of what's been happening in this country ever since about 1940. Even before 1940, there were some Supreme Court justices who wanted to strike God and religion out of government. And regardless of the fact that when these people take their oath of office, they swear they will uphold the Constitution of the United States, nonetheless, they decided to go back to the Constitution, read things into it that weren't there, and ignore things that were there, because for whatever reason, their personal belief is that religion should not be in any way.
Right, I'm hearing more about that. There's no authority that does this. It's just, you say, a personal feeling. I mean, my God,
yes.
We can have personal feelings about anything.
And that's why we have what we have. That's why we have a republic in this country, so that we adhere to what our founders based our freedoms on, that our freedoms come from God, not from government. So whatever party happens to be in power at the time cannot take away this liberty or that liberty cannot take away your right to religious freedom, because our founders believed and our Constitution was written that those rights come from God, not from government.
There are some, I agree with you, there are some people, I guess you can call them secularists, who don't want to believe that there's any possibility of a God, and they pull away or diminish or reduce or attack Christianity, the nativity scene. I think I mentioned it to you on the phone. I've seen things that are like that. Certain
Yes.
schools will do that. Okay, so if you don't have, you should never have affected that, because frankly the right to free speech is implied with religion. It's all
Yes.
it's all implied.
Yes.
It's all connected.
That's why the First Amendment is so important. Those 5 freedoms in the First Amendment, freedom of religion is the first one. And if you lose freedom of religion, you know you have lost your freedom of speech, because now you can no longer speak about your beliefs, your faith, and the teachings of your church. You can no longer write about it, freedom of press. You can no longer assemble to worship. So all those freedoms fall when freedom of religion falls. And it was the issue of guaranteeing freedom of conscience and freedom of religion. It was that issue that almost derailed our entire Constitution, because the colony of Virginia would not ratify the Constitution, because people there felt that it didn't sufficiently defend and protect certain rights, especially the right to religious freedom. So an agreement was made that they would ratify the Constitution if there were a Bill of Rights to follow that fully protected religious freedom. So religious freedom was incredibly important to our founders, and people who now are chipping away at religious freedom ever since 1940, when there was a Supreme Court, and I'm not a Supreme Court analyst, but there was a Supreme Court decision that slowly but definitely turned a corner in defending religious freedom. Because in the past, it was commonly known and accepted that President Thomas Jefferson had said that there's a wall of separation between church and state. And if you read what he wrote about that, it was very clear that that wall of separation was intended to keep government out of our churches. In 1940, the decisions with the Supreme Court started to turn that on its head and say instead that this wall of separation meant in every way to keep religious people, thoughts, sentiments, and morals out of government. And that's exactly the opposite. So if you talk to people today about the separation of church and state, they have a completely backward understanding of what that means.
That's important what you're saying, because I hear that kind of argument coming from people, especially in one side of the equation. I'm going to read something to you just because it came up. Here at home, Christianity and Christian religious practices are also under attack, but in more subtle ways and under misinterpretation of the principle of freedom of religion. In the United States, that legal doctrine is cited to marginalize Christian prayer and traditions, while at the same time dramatically accommodating, even expanding Muslim religion practices. And there's myriad of examples that are like this. Doesn't it seem odd to you that they can support, that the government will support adding Muslim religious doctrines and methodology and Sharia law and talk about them, and the president won't even use the word terrorist in the same word with the word Islamic or Muslim? He has reasons for that, because in their religion they don't do that. They considered it whatever they consider it, but he's basically allowed to be killed or something. It's crazy how these things develop. But we're all placing this need to have to break down existing Christian everything. Integrity, motives, beliefs, prayer. Everything is being, school systems not saying prayers, nativity scenes not being shown. All this to me is a sign of very dangerous concern.
And what you're talking about, the government favoring one religion over another, is entirely unconstitutional and absolutely against the First Amendment.
And recently it is all about that. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that is what I keep reading about. I keep reading about Muslims have to be in this book, this revisionist historians wanting to change how things used to look. everybody's pushing this one religion. I say everybody, you know what I mean, the euphemism, but I'm just trying to get the idea across that everyone is tolerating that, and they're not supporting Christianity.
Well, there's so much political correctness in our country, and the political correctness takes the truth and twists it. How strangely will the words of the tyrant twist the meaning of words. Thomas Jefferson said that. How strangely will the tyrant twist the meaning of words. And we see that all the time in our country today, unfortunately. I laugh when I used to read about, and still read about, the Affordable Care Act, the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. There's nothing affordable. Everyone knew that in reading this act. So that's taking language and falsifying it. So when they talk about, for example,
they're labeling or creating a narrative for it. They're just labeling it something that seems to work for the person who won't read it.
That's right. That's right. And if we don't have honest language in our discussions, or if we are so politically correct, how can we speak to each other? How can we converse with each other? How can we know what each other is talking about? If I tell you, buy this car, it's very affordable. I'm a car salesman, I'm going to sell you this wonderful car, it's very affordable. You buy the car and you find out when you read the fine print that you're responsible for this, that, the other thing, and that all these things are not covered that would normally be covered. I am lying to you when I say that car is affordable, but I'm doing it deliberately, and I am falsifying the language of business.
Certainly being incomplete, that's for sure, yeah.
Yes, yes. And so for the government to favor any religion over another is unconstitutional. The government is required by our Constitution to be welcoming and friendly to all religions and those who have no religion. If I were an atheist, this is the country I would want to live in, because the First Amendment protects your conscience, whether you believe in a religion or God or not.
That's important,
you are protected. There are countries in this world where if you don't follow the faith, or even a certain form of a certain faith, you can be killed. You will be persecuted, you will be harassed, you may be taxed, and you may even be killed for that. So if you're an atheist, this is where you want to be. The same as our freedom of speech. If you want to say horrible things about this country, you can if you're here, because your freedom of speech is protected, just like your freedom of conscience is protected. So you want to be here, and you want to strengthen the First Amendment for everyone.
That makes a lot of sense, but so these, some of these people I'm talking to, because I do want to talk to people on the other side of the aisle from where I speak, to gain as much information as I can. Support or debate, because I think the freedom of that opportunity to support and debate your own issues creates the country that we live in, supports the First Amendment supported, and allows me to engage and learn something that maybe I don't know anything about. We are stuck sometimes with a mindset that it's like a block. You can't get through certain things. You just can't get through certain things. The people that don't see that the issues of Sharia law, which is a Muslim fanatic religion, is upon us, and that certain elements of it are being forced upon us, and that it stops us from thinking of the First Amendment. That doesn't equate for them. But the First Amendment is the reason why we can talk about it, but in their religion we can't talk about it. You can't talk about anything except what's acceptable in their religion.
Well, our country and our laws are based on the Judeo-Christian ethic. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not
and those are good things for me. I like them. That's a good plan.
And our laws are based on the Ten Commandments and the Judeo-Christian ethic. So if you have another form of law that is based on something else, it's not going to fit with our laws if it contradicts. So we have our laws, and those are the laws by which we have agreed to be governed. Those are the laws which we have said to our government, I will give you the power. I, as the electorate, will give you the power to enforce these laws, basically, and people may not realize it, basically to enforce the moral laws of the Ten Commandments, because our laws are based largely on the Ten Commandments.
Well, what is it that you think we can do right now, other than to mobilize or try to strengthen the... I haven't had much luck out there in strengthening the commitment to keeping people from thinking that there's a reason for dropping out Christianity. I haven't had much luck with it, but I do hear, this is mostly politically issue for me, and the people I'm talking to are mostly politically oriented. But I don't see a lot of. I know I'm not doing something.
Well,
in other words, and I just don't know what I can do to help.
If people understand, education is the biggest thing. And education, when you say that, it sounds very boring. But if we don't know our freedoms and from where they came and why they came, we don't understand how important they are. And worse yet, we don't realize when we're losing them. So what we have to do is educate, and I know many people who are very good at this, and this is one of the things that I do. I spend a lot of time speaking about to people of all faiths. I was just recently invited to Philadelphia to tour the new Mormon temple in the center of the city of Philadelphia, because I work with the LDS community on Long Island. And they understand every faith is educating now. Every religion is educating people now about the importance of First Amendment to all believers and non-believers. And if you want people to understand and become aware of what's happening to religion, and especially to Christianity, because we're the biggest target. We're the biggest target of the secularists. We're the biggest target of people who believe that government should be the provider of all goods and services, of all charity, and so forth. So if you look at what is the target of that, Christians in the military are targeted every week. I read of a new case where it could be a chaplain.
I was just going to go there with you regarding the chaplains in the military. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I was just going to go there with you. Go ahead.
Right. It could be a chaplain. It could be a member of the military who decides to pray, who decides to share a Bible verse even. On the military bases, apparently they have a display where it's called the Missing Man, where they will have in the dining hall a chair and a table, an empty chair and a table that is set with certain items on it. And it'll have an American flag, and it will have a Bible,
it's like
among other things.
Like the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier,
Right.
the same representative.
But apparently this is a common thing on military bases. And the Freedom from Religion Foundation insists that those Bibles be taken away, that they be taken off, even though the vast majority of the soldiers are Christian.
Yeah.
And when Bibles are offered and given away for free on military posts, they're very welcome and they're asked for. But in the military, we have had so many attacks on religious freedom, it's disgraceful. Americans don't know.
Right.
When our soldiers go in, or our sailors, or when anyone enlists in the military, they don't give up their religious freedom because they're now part of the military. So their religious freedom is protected by the law firms that will come in and defend them. And when this happens again and again in this country, these cases are almost always successfully defended on the part of the soldier, the sailor, the chaplain. For example, in Texas,
I mean, the chaplain is losing the argument,
No,
the
winning.
legal system. Okay,
Winning.
good.
Winning.
Okay, on what basis?
Because it's such a blatantly obvious denial when you get into court. It's so blatantly obvious that this was this chaplain's right.
Can't you transfer the success of that idea onto other areas about religious freedom? I mean, it seems to be a no-brainer. You can move that. It's very clear, right?
It's very clear, but you know what? The secularists and so forth are very determined. They will not give up. And they're different individuals. I mean, there are organizations too, but a lot of these are different individuals. What state was it in? I believe Texas, where they just built the tallest cross in the whole country.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
And an individual sued them.
Right.
And he lost his case in court. And the reason he lost his case was because it's their right on their property to do what they wish. They got all the permits, they had everything they needed to build that cross. And this individual then withdrew his case. And he withdrew his case, and he admitted that it just peeved him.
Yeah.
That was the word he used, that it annoyed him to have this huge cross because he doesn't believe in the cross and the crucifixion, and so he didn't want to see it. So for that, he would remove the religious freedom and the freedom of speech and religious expression.
Right. So there's where you can draw the line. See, that's clear to me, too.
Yes, yes. But these things happen all the time, and we're so immersed in our culture with the belief that, oh, religion doesn't belong in school, oh, religion doesn't belong in government, oh, religion doesn't belong here, that when none of these things are true. A Supreme Court case...
If the people were allowed to vote on this, don't you think we'd do better to vote on this subject? Just throwing that in there. If we had the opportunity, like this, we're not a referendum state. Is this a state-by-state issue? No, it's federal
these
government.
are federal issues.
So then we should be able to...
Because it's the federal Constitution and the Bill of Rights.
So we should be able to, well, each individual school is state-run. They seem to have a lot of power.
And the states do have a certain amount of control over that. For example, in the state of Ohio, I read recently that every classroom is allowed to and encouraged to have the motto of the state of Ohio in, and I'm ashamed to say that I don't remember what that motto is, but it has God in it. It has that three-letter word, G-O-D, in the state motto. Now, there are classrooms across this country where if you put up anything with the word God on it, there will be people knocking down the doors, complaining to the principal, speaking to the school board,
Supreme
separation
Court in
of
Georgia
church and
had
state.
that situation where one of the judges had put that up with the word God in it, and he was struck down by other people. So they had to remove this nice claim.
And sometimes these claims and so forth, sometimes they go in favor of religious freedom, sometimes they go against it. We do have some judges who don't want freedom of religion, basically. They don't want freedom of conscience. And they may have read somewhere the phrase separation of church and state, and not bothered to go back and read all of the whole entire statement about separation of church and state to know the context in which it came.
Is there a way for you to pull out and describe that? We only have about a minute and a half left. Is there a way for you can pull out? Because I think that's important, because that's the argument I feel. Oh, separation in church and state.
Separation of church and state was, Thomas Jefferson made that statement because after he was elected, there were religious groups in the country who were very afraid of persecution. Minorities, the Jews and so forth, were very afraid of persecution. So they wrote to him just as they had written to President Washington. They wrote to President Jefferson saying they were hoping that he would maintain the freedom of religion that our Constitution and our Bill of Rights guaranteed. And he wrote back and he said, I contemplate with sovereign reverence that act of the entire American people, and he was referring to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, that act of the entire American people that assures that you will be allowed to run your church and your faith in accordance with your conscience, and that the laws of the United States and the Constitution of the United States establishes a wall of separation between church and state, so that you will be free to practice your faith and follow your conscience in this country.
So there's a lot of misinformation about that.
Oh, the misinformation is incredible.
Yeah.
That anyone would cherry pick that phrase and so misuse
it's just thrown
it.
out in conversation, all the time.
And so misuse it. Teachers will say to a student, oh, that crucifix you're wearing, put it inside your shirt. Separation of church and state.
Yeah.
Or they'll say to a student, you're wearing a T-shirt with a religious saying on it, Jesus loves you, whatever it is. Take that T-shirt, go in the the restroom, and turn that T-shirt inside out, because separation of church and
I've
state.
seen things that are like that. Yeah.
Which is not at all correct.
So
not at all.
You're going to force me to go back and look at this, but I'm very glad you did. Thank you very much for this opportunity, Barbara Samuel. She's done a good job.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. You've been watching Gray Matters, the program that brings you back to the history of social changes put in place and energized by the 60s and 70s from the baby boomer generation. We also look at hot-button political and social conditions of our day, measuring the successes and failures of that chronicled time. We hope you continue to watch this program. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again next time.